Welcome to the On Target podcast. We're kicking off season 2 with a very, very special guest, Matt Hicks. Matt's a London-based VP of global sales at Vertice, the purchasing platform that helps clients to manage their SaaS stack. Matt's a self-professed fintech nerd, but he's also a storied sales leader, and I'll be talking to him about shaping culture and creating high-performing teams, along with unpacking how he thinks about team structures, incentives, and a whole lot more. Matt, it's great to have you this morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex. Privileged to be on the podcast, so thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to meet you. Now, salespeople need an elevator pitch, Matt, and you pitch your company day in and day out. So if you had an elevator pitch for yourself in 30 seconds or less, how would you introduce yourself?
I'm Matt Hicks. I'm 37 years old. I live in Richmond in southwest London, and I've been working in sales for my entire career, which is 15 years now, both in financial services and in software. My journey in sales has been a wild ride. I've gone from being fired from my very first job in sales in 2008 to being a high-performing individual contributor, and then the last 6 years I've been a sales leader in various roles. So it's not been the perfect journey by any means, and it's been one of growth and development, and definitely not one that's finished. So yeah, that's me.
Well, we've got to unpack that story in a bit more detail, Matt. We've heard getting fired and then turning that around into being a global VP of sales. So just talk to us a bit more about your story in some more detail. I'd love to hear some of the bigger lessons, some of the bigger learnings that have gotten you to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. Like growing up, I was always quite a quiet person. I wouldn't say introverted necessarily, but definitely quiet, verging on a little shy growing up. I was very good at subjects like maths. I was very good with computers. And I remember very vividly the day I told my dad I was taking my first job in sales. Him being a little sheepish and, questioning whether that was going to be a good fit for my personality type. He said, you've got a very analytical mind, and maybe sales is not the right place for you. And looking back on that moment, I just think my father was probably trying to protect me from what was, I think sales was a very different place in 2008. I remember it being brutal when I first started. It was $100 a day type situation. I think my territory was companies beginning with A and B in Scandinavia, so the territory management was done on letters of the alphabet, which seems archaic thinking about it now. And that was kind of a brutal baptism of fire, working for a company called Data Monitor in a very, very high energy sales floor. And I was let go from that role after 7 months for underperformance. And that was when I was, kind of driven to turn things around. And one of the things that I really care about is understanding how things work and how you can improve them. So I look back on some of the early sales jobs in my career, and I remember thinking like, this can't be the best way of approaching this. This can't be the best way of trying to establish value and establish fit with customers. And I guess that was the start of the journey. I then took various roles selling in the field for a financial services company in Canary Wharf called Euler Hermes. So that was out in the car, going out and visiting clients on site, which was a super interesting journey for me, because you never knew who you were going to meet. We had a telesales team up in Manchester, and they would book appointments into my diary, and I would sort of just drive and sort of turn up to those appointments, which were of varying quality. And then I sort of decided that big corporates wasn't for me, and I wanted to go and work in in a startup environment where I could have a greater impact on what I was doing and maybe play a more pivotal role in building out some of the processes from the ground up, and making sure that, the one commodity that we control as salespeople, which is how we spend our time, was maximized. Maximizing every day and every moment of every day to get the best possible outcomes for customers is really what I'm focused on. The big breakthrough I got, and I think everybody needs a breakthrough moment in their career in sales, and a lot of it is in your control, but I think a lot of it depends on the company that you're working for. Was at a company called Kodak, and I joined very early at Kodak. I was part of the founding team. I was the first go-to-market hire, and over a 5-year period, we scaled that business from zero revenue up to, there was about 300 people when I left, and we'd raised 100 million from JP Morgan, and had sort of tripled the business from a revenue perspective year over year. So that was quite the journey, and I guess I moved from Kodak to Vertice, because I think once you've had one breakthrough success and you've scaled one business, then it's always like, well, can you do it again? And that's kind of the I wanted to throw myself into a new challenge to prove to myself as much as anyone that I could take another business from zero to sort of scaling up. So yeah.
Incredible. I mean, Matt, in 37 years, I feel like you've seen a lot of movies. You've been able to pick yourself up off the deck, find a way forward. And to scale a company of that size and scale from $0 in revenue is something pretty special. It feeds nicely and segues nicely into the topic of really talent, really, and talent development, and also some of the principles of building, sustaining, scaling a best-in-class sales team. So I'd love to just learn a bit more about how you think about that from a principle standpoint. What are some of the core things that really underpinned your success in building teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think I remember when I took the top job for the first time, my CEO sat me down and he said, "Look, Matt, you're very good at some things, but there's some things this job requires which you haven't done that much, and therefore you're going to need to practice and build a process, and through repetition you're going to get good at it." And one of the key things he said is, like, we're planning to scale this team up significantly this year, and hiring is going to be a key part of what makes us successful in the future. And of course, with hiring, it's always lagging, right? Because you make the hiring decision, and then you've got to ramp the reps, and you've got to get them into a position where they can be successful. And so it's difficult, because if you make the wrong decisions, you have to look back at yourself 6, 9, or 12 months ago to kind of question why you were making those decisions. So it's a tricky one, and you've got to play the long game. But I think with hiring, like many other disciplines within sales, it's all about building a process and making sure, in prospecting, you have an ICP. When you're hiring, you need to have a rep profile that works for you. And when I say profile, I'm not talking about what people look like or where they're from. I'm talking about, like, what stage of their career are they at? What's the OTE that you're that's achievable for those individuals? Are they from the market? Are they not from the market? Do they prospect themselves? Do they not? So understanding that rep profile based on your company's circumstances is, like, extremely important. And then having a discipline in the process, making sure you're giving everybody an equitable chance to show what they can do and show their competency throughout that process is very important as well. I still don't get hiring decisions 100% right, but I aim for 80%. I think having rigor in that hiring process is, like, extremely important. And I think I try to make it as much about the rep I'm interviewing me, as it is the other way around, right? Because it's a process of two people managing one another's expectations. Because if you're not doing that effectively, then you're just going to set yourself up for failure, whether you're the rep or you're me, right? If I'm like not being honest and telling people about the situation we're in today and where we're trying to get to, then the rep's going to find out very quickly that that's not the case, and actually there is no leads from marketing or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think you just got to be super honest and make sure that you believe in what you're saying, because if you don't, then it's going to be difficult for you to hire great people because they won't believe you either, right? So
absolutely, I completely agree that it's also two-way, right? Both people have got to feel great and excited and enthused by the opportunity, and so leading with that transparency, being clear about what the role is today, what it could lead into, is incredibly important. The last thing you want is someone to turn up on a Monday feeling primed to take on a role and then have a very different expectation once they see the reality. It doesn't serve either side ultimately.
Exactly.
I'd love to just double tap. You mentioned prospecting, Matt, and I'm sure we can both attest to the importance of generating pipeline being really the lifeblood of the role, whether you're a seller, whether you're a leader or beyond. So could you just talk to us about how you go about building and fostering a culture that really is based around the importance of pipeline generation?
Yeah, totally. Like, it's something that it's one thing that is I know that I'm very good at is fostering a culture which is focused on generating pipe every day. And I'll start by just I guess bringing to the attention of the audience like a peculiarity about sales teams, in my opinion, and that's that we have this role, BDR or SDR, but an entry level role in sales, and we expect that entry level individual to be in some cases, the main contributor of our top of funnel activity. Now, if you think about that, that's kind of weird, because those are the people who, they don't really have a network, or they've got a very immature network. So a lot of their outreach is going to be ice cold, and that's fine to some extent. And then you have, maybe sales leaders like myself who maybe aren't doing that much prospecting at all. By the way, I still find time to prospect every week, every day if I can, because I've got an extensive network. And frankly, it's easier for me with my fancy job title than it is for my BDRs, right? So it's hugely important to us. I'm working for a company now where our CEO is one of our most prolific prospectors, which is great because he clearly is a very experienced entrepreneur, and he understands like why it's so important. So it's not a job that's reserved for the folks at the lowest level of the hierarchy. It's something that really drives the business forwards, and it's hard. Prospecting is hard. You can't just pitch up having not done it for a while and be good at it. It's something that you need to repeat, and you get good at it, and you gather evidence. And lots of the folks these days, they're very data led, and they want to comb through the data and understand what works, what doesn't work, and that's great. But you've got to be flexing those muscles every day if you can, and that's how you get really good at prospecting. So that's how I think about it. How do I ensure that that culture is adopted widely within the team? I think it's it's relatively straightforward these days, because you can create feedback loops using the tooling that we all have available to us within a modern company. So we people talk about celebrating the small wins, and that's fine if you're always in the same room together, but often we are. We have distributed teams in the US and in Australia. So we use, Slack internally, and every time a prospect passes through a key moment in the cycle, a Slack notification will ping to say that an SQL has been achieved, and the team can celebrate those wins together, and then the BDR can explain exactly how they got that lead, what was the messaging that worked for them, and that means that they're not just learning in a silo; they're learning in a team, and everyone can benefit from what's worked well for them. So, and look, I think we're now the sales changes so quickly, and I think the post-pandemic era, which we're firmly in now, I think email sequencing is losing a bit of its effectiveness, and we're starting to see attribution on in-person events and calling going up and to the right, and actually email sequences are they're losing their effectiveness, because I guess when everybody has got these tools, then it's difficult to cut through the noise, right? So that's my current thinking on prospecting. I still haven't got it worked out. We don't have as much pipe as we would like, but I think it's the focus, the relentless focus on pipe gen that's important, and not it's not something that's reserved for entry level positions, right? It should be everyone in the sales org has a responsibility for it.
Well, Matt, you can never have enough pipeline, so I think we can all relate to wanting and needing more. There was so much to unlock in that. One of the things that stands out to me in what you're talking about is just that daily rigor, and the point that no one's really above that station. I'm actually reading at the moment Frank Slootman's book Amp It Up. For anyone who doesn't know, Frank Slootman is the CEO of Snowflake, one of the most successful software businesses out there. And one of the principles that he talks a lot about is really prioritizing execution over strategy. And what you often find is that people spend so much time strategizing and planning and doing the data analysis, certainly with all of the tooling that we have, that they deprioritize the execution, when actually you have someone else who's executing daily in the trenches doing the work. Actually, they tend to learn much more, and they often have the more effective strategy because they've learned it through doing the reps. So I think a lot of that feeds into what you're talking about here, Matt, and really, really important point. I want to I take a half pivot actually into talking about the development of the talent. We've spoken a bit about the importance of generating pipeline, how to actually build and curate a world-class team. But when it comes to ongoing development, enablement, we're seeing a lot more tools and platforms that support these types of things. But how do you go about fostering a culture and getting the team really bought into the importance of continual development, enablement, and more?
No, I really like this topic because it's about supporting the individual on their journey, because obviously they're employed by Vertice or whoever it is at this moment in time, but they're also on their own journey. I've just talked about my career in sales over the last 15 years, and I had several employers, and each stepping stone of that journey has taught me a different lesson, and it's important to remember that everyone else is on their own journey. So I see enablement in kind of two categories. One of them is like data and tooling, so it's harnessing data from the entire team and all of the inputs that the team have, and translating that data into actionable insights. So I don't know if you're a sci-fi guy at all, Alex, but there's a concept in sci-fi of like a hive mind. And I think of sales enablement from that perspective, almost like the hive minds. Like their job is to curate the inputs from the team and then make sure that we are learning as a unit, as a hive, so that if there's a really important learning someone has in a discovery call or in a competitive bake-off, we all benefit from that learning, and we're not acting as individual actors. So that's the first side of it. And then the second side is, I guess it's more cultural. It's about creating a safe space for people, so there's no fear of reprimands if something doesn't go well, right? So that sort of no blame culture, and it's sharing the losses as much as we share the wins, and doing deep dive retros together as a team where we lose, despite it being painful. I try not to rub salt in the wounds immediately after we've lost a deal, but it's important we learn from those losses and those failures together. But people won't do that if they feel that it's going to impact their ability to be successful, get promoted, whatever it is, right? Because ultimately, they've got to look after their own interests. But for me, it's about like, if we lose, that's on me as well. It's not just on you. Obviously, we've got to look at the inputs that led to that outcome. That's how I think about sales enablement. Unfortunately, I have, when you're early, you've got to do some of this stuff yourself as a leader. But as you get bigger, I've got people in the ops team who focus on this stuff, and that their job is to enable me, but more importantly, probably the team. And if you create that environment, then and make learning and development a priority for people, not just within the context of their current employment, but like them as a professional. I think you really get the best out of people, because it shows that you care about them. They will move on at some point. You're ambitious, and your best people, there's always going to be a time when they look to spread their wings and do something else, and then that's fine. I just want them to do as much as they can while they're here. So
absolutely, we want to encourage them to fly and make them better in the process. There's some really interesting things in what you just mentioned there. This premise of shared responsibility seems to just be quite thematic in a lot of what you talk about. And I think that's an interesting takeaway for people to consider, right? Winning as a team, losing as a team, learning as a team, growing as a collective. All of these things can be really important when you're trying to build and foster a culture where people feel that they're unified in pursuit towards some form of a goal or some form of a target. I want to shift the conversation now, Matt, into a bit more about the way that you set your own week up for success. So it'd be great if you could peel back the curtains as to really what a typical week looks like for you, and any core pillars or principles that have helped you really get ahead when it comes to time management.
Yeah. This is it's something that's had to improve since I've become a leader, because you're like, there's never enough time in the day or the week or the month, and I'm always sort of up against it from a priorities perspective. But I think it's got to start with building good habits, looking after your mind and your body, and like sleep. I just bought an Oura ring because I need to make sure that I'm sleeping well, and I'm giving my body time to rest. But I think for me, it always starts with having a good morning routine. I try and hit the gym in the morning, not for long. I go for sort of 20, 25 minutes at a time, but go as often as I can, because that sets me up well for the day. And then, my perspective on sales is like, it's part science, part art. And it's becoming increasingly sciencey, actually, as there's more and more process and data. It's more of a science, which is why I think there's more introverts and more kind of non-stereotypical salespeople around these days, who are much more focused on the critical path analysis and how do I get the best outcome here, rather than having, I guess, what I would describe as sales flair. Those people who are really talented at talking or public speaking. I studied a bit of literature on how the reward paths within your brain work, and it's your brain is obviously very complex, and we don't know exactly how it works. Remarkably, like a lot of it we still don't know, but there's some things around behaviors which we do know quite a lot about. I'm talking about cue, habit, rewards, basically, and understanding yourself. Like, how long can you concentrate for? Because for me, it's not that long. It's probably 90 minutes, and I start to get a little bit, I lose productivity, or I need to go do something. So just make sure you understand that about yourself. And for some people, it's longer, some people, it's shorter, and break your day up into chunks around your concentration span, so that you can really focus, do deep work, do client calls, do whatever you're doing, but then make sure you do something afterwards. And when I say reward, I don't mean a coffee or a cigarette or whatever it might be. I mean, like, go take a walk. Or for me, increasingly these days, it's like, go and say thank you to somebody for something great that they did, that I noticed. and I wanted to show my appreciation for them. And that's been a really effective thing for me, because it makes me feel good going and telling someone that, and it breaks up the day, and it gives me a chance to go and chat to people in other teams. So yeah, that's how I think about my day, is just build good habits. Repetition is everything in sales, you know. Yeah, in terms of tools, I'm like a big Google guy. I seem to be like Google everything these days. I just gave up a long-term relationship with Samsung to move to Pixel. So yeah, I'm kind of, everything is managed via my diary. My diary is public, so everyone can see it, but I put everything in it, you know, even personal stuff, so that I know what I'm doing each day. And that's sort of my source of truth in terms of how I organize my time. But I use all of the other Google apps. I mean, I record a lot of my one-to-ones and calls, and those notes are transcribed, and then I can search for words afterwards. So it's the tech's moved on quite a lot in the last couple of years. So, but yeah, unashamedly Google everything these days.
The tech has really moved on massively. I mean, it sometimes blows my mind, some of the things that we're able to do and some of the insights we're able to get. What I have found to be really important, though, is you've got to have a good level of awareness around really the data that actually matters and the things that really move the needle and are impactful. I mean, I've got certain tools that have got a 1,000,000,001 features, but ultimately there's 3 or 4 that I found really make the difference in my day to day. So I'm all for the way that the market's starting to move and some of the insights we have to be able to make more data driven decisions. But it's certainly also about finding the tooling and the specific features that actually make the difference. I think the other thing that I got from what you were talking about is really just having a great personal operating rhythm or system, right. Which is something that I can absolutely relate to. You've got to find, again, what works for you. I actually used to have an Aura ring, Matt. I don't know where it is now. I lost it because I found that was kind of in the category for me where I almost started to become a bit obsessive over the data, right. And it wasn't serving me in the way that I wanted or needed it to.
It's telling me what I already know, to be honest.
Right.
And it's telling me that I actually sleep less than I thought I did. So I don't know if I just got it. So maybe it's an end of quarter thing. We'll see next week if it improves or not. But
yeah, I'd love to part 2 with you on just how you're getting on with that. Because as I said, it didn't last for me. But some of the other principles, meditation, the exercise, absolutely journaling for me, are big parts of the staple. So it's great to hear we share some of that at least. Just on the point of time, because completely with you that time is the biggest threat for any sales leader. It's a thing that we can't, in essence, manufacture more of, right? And it's a thing that we can never get enough of. So for you, what would you say are some of the biggest drains on a sales leader's time? And are there any tactical things that you've been able to do to start to get better control over the diary or to find more time in your week?
Yeah, and this is something which I've really worked on because I've had to focus on what's important, particularly in the current climate where it's taking no prisoners because it's just got a lot more difficult to get deals done. So when I first became a leader, I was getting pulled into all of these, cross-functional leadership things. And I was like, this is great. I'm kind of, made it into the big leagues and going to meetings with other leaders all the time. And then I quickly realized that it's like, what's the purpose of me being here? If the meeting agenda is about something where I can provide feedback or insights from the front lines, from the sales team, then of course I'm happy to participate there to help the company to make good strategic decisions. But if I read the agenda of the meeting and I'm like, I don't have strongly held opinions on any of that, so I'm not coming to that meeting. And I'm not being rude. I'm just, I don't think I have anything to contribute. You send me the notes afterwards and I'll see if there's anything that I missed. And nothing happened. Nobody thought worse of me. I saved, several hours a week just doing that. So that was one thing. Just because it's a meeting with people who are your peers, in inverted commas, doesn't mean it's more important than doing stuff with clients or with your own team. The second one is spending too much time with, I don't want to say underperformers, but people who are not rowing the boat as hard as I am. So if I'm rowing the boat at the front of the boat and I turn around and I see someone who's not rowing as hard as I am, I think the temptation is to invest a disproportionate amount of time trying to get that person rowing. Either the person is going to row hard or they're not going to row hard, right? And I think, I don't want to make this about underperformance because that wasn't your question, but I think it's like, set expectations. I don't tell people what to do. I think it's, in 2023, I've adopted a servant leadership methodology. I'm not an autocratic sort of leader. I set expectations and then I make observations and I gather the evidence about whether I think that person is giving it their all or not. And if they're not, I move to the next steps. And it's pretty simple for me. So I've stopped spending too much time on, pushing boulders uphill, basically, that's never going to work out. So those are probably the two things which have shaved off the most time for me.
I love both. Just on that piece with the performance, it's a fascinating topic that certainly needs more time in the sense that, I often have this principle that you want to help your top performers go further and faster. And to your point, what I see all too often is a great word, right? Disproportionate amount of time being invested trying to drag people over the finish line when actually you've got some people that want to run through the tape. And our role is to really help those people, again, do that more efficiently and more effectively and not spend an overexerted amount of time trying to drag people over a finish line that they're not particularly keen on doing. On your first point, I'd love to get your thoughts on this principle that Elon Musk has. I study Elon Musk quite a lot. I just find him a really just interesting, fascinating person and controversial, but certainly he's done something right in his life. And one of his principles is that if he joins a meeting, he encourages that if anyone at any point just feels that they can no longer be helpful to the purpose of the meeting, or actually they cannot make a meaningful contribution, that they should just get up and walk out. And he also manages his diary in 5-minute increments. I'd love to just get your thoughts on that, because I guess that's probably quite controversial in its own right.
Yeah, totally. Like maybe some. I don't think I got it directly from Elon, but maybe it's filtered through his influence to me. It sounds like it probably has, but I think managing my diary in 5-minute increments would be way too stressful for me. Like I already find like the half-hour thing like quite a lot. And also I think if you're going to do something like I get a short attention span and I get distracted, but I'm trying to practice being present and, dedicating myself to my counterparty, whether that's a client or a colleague. And actually you get far better. You get far better outcomes from meetings if you do that. So yeah, I think, Elon's probably right. I think, one of the things about the pandemic was because we were all remote, everyone was checking in on everyone all the time. And it's just like a bit unnecessary. I think particularly in a high performance sales team, it's like just set out the stall and like make the culture a high performing culture. And, I try to steal a lot of insight from high performing sports teams, whether they're, football teams or cycling teams. And, a lot of it is very translatable into sales. Some of the best reps I've worked with have been ex-athletes. And, I just try to keep things quite simple. But also respect that other people might not operate like that. And just make sure that you're communicating with them that, I'm not ditching this meeting because, I'm not being rude or I don't like you or whatever. It's like, I've really got to prioritize, other stuff. Let me know if I can help going forwards. Cause I think there's, I think particularly in the UK where we are very polite and we don't want to rock the boat and upset people. And that's, I think broadly that's a very positive thing. But I think sometimes in business where time's short, you've just got to be firm about not wasting time basically. So yeah. I don't know. How is Elon? I know Elon has made some pretty drastic moves at Twitter. I don't know. Can you update me on how that's going? Is Twitter still alive or?
Well, it seems like they're burning a lot less money than they ever than they were before. Put it that way. I think they were a bit of a sinking ship as it relates to that. And wrongly or rightly, he's tried to right size things. And look, he's made some big decisions, but he's also clearly proven to have a lot of success. And some of these principles that we're talking about are what have underpinned that. So one to continue to explore, I guess, for both of us. I'd love to shift gears now just to talk a bit more about really closing deals, winning business, right? And I'd love to get your thoughts on any core principles that you really believe all sales leaders and sellers alike should really adhere to when it comes to winning business, and why do you have those principles?
Yeah, so I tried to, our job as B2B salespeople, at least, is to like establish a fit and ultimately to kick off the journey of our company providing your company with value. Like, and when you reframe things in that context, it stops becoming about selling and it starts becoming about being almost like an investigator, or like somebody who can really understand their client and how their business functions, and so, a problem solver really, and somebody who understands that the outcome is around solving the problem. So we have people talk a lot about mutual success plans and controlling the timeline. One of the things that I try to do within my team is like focus on the value, or at least the start of the value journey. So for us, it's like a compelling event. At Vertice, there's always a compelling event. It might be a big renewal for one of their tools that's coming up, and we build the entire process and the entire business case is around that, so that there's an event and there's a line in the sand that we can work backwards from to getting value for the customer. It might be a big saving, or it might be something that they get and they can, I guess, be celebrating internally on their team. And that's what I try to do. It's like, it shouldn't be us celebrating the signature. It should be them celebrating the fact that they did the thing that we said that we were going to do for them. And it's just very subtle, right? Because the two things are obviously very closely related, and one is a precursor to the other, but it's just slightly reframing how you're thinking about it. And it's all about empathy and making sure that you're doing right by the customer. And then in terms of closing, I'll share a story on a deal we closed recently. So we're in a hyper competitive market. I think if you're, most high performing teams are, right. It wouldn't, if something's worth doing, there's going to be competitors who come in. So we're often in competitor kind of bake offs, and we had a competitor bake off recently. And it was business that we had originated. Actually, I had originated it, and we were at the final stage, and we know that our competitor had come in and probably undercut us. That was our gut feeling. The CFO we were dealing with was kind of a little bit guarded, playing his cards close to the chest, but our sense was that we were getting undercut because these guys had come in late to the process. And, he said, I remember it very vividly, I wouldn't be doing my job very well as a CFO if I didn't look at the market. And of course, as part of our process, we talk about that a lot, right? Competitive pressure is one of the mechanisms you can use to achieve the best possible terms. So we said to the customer, okay, we understand, that's completely fine. And we then we said, let's park the terms. We want to make sure that you are working with the preferred partner who you think is going to drive the best outcomes for you. So again, it's about focusing on the outcome, bringing it away from the terms and bringing it away from us against them to like the outcome, and like who do you think is going to do the best job for you on achieving that. And that works extremely well for us. Obviously, we said to them that we want to be competitive. Just tell us where we need to be, and we'll do our best to try and put table something that's competitive. We ended up signing the deal at a premium to our competitor, with terms that worked for both parties. And I think, that was kind of one from this quarter, which I was like, stay calm in those competitive scenarios and just focus on the thing that, the reason why the guy took the call in the first place, right? So, yeah.
It's a great story. We talk so much about value selling. And I think in a way, in this era, the words start to become undercooked or underappreciated because we just hear it all the time, right? Sell on value, sell on value. But it is just so incredibly important. You know, we're in the business of solving large scale problems and driving transformative value. And when you really understand those two things and you get your head out the trees in terms of focusing on features, functions, and a transactional way of looking at a deal, it really does make the difference. And I still think that holistically sellers have such a long way to go, right, to really start to shift that mindset. And in a ever increasing competitive landscape for a large proportion of businesses, certainly with the economic downturn and more, we've all got to raise the bar, right? We've all got to start to get really clear and comfortable about what it takes to be a great seller, and being able to sell on value and being in scenarios where actually you're winning business when you cost more than your competitor is great validation of doing a tremendous job in terms of helping a customer to understand value. So congratulations to you and the team on that. Last couple of things from me, Matt, just on this continual topic of really deals and sales excellence. Are there really any key mistakes or key things that you would call out that you often see sellers making out there in the field that they should really spend more time on or focus on? Any repeated patterns you would say that you've seen over the years?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's still making new mistakes, and I feel like it's the current environment. Even when you followed absolutely the playbook down to a T, things still go wrong, right? So I think the classic one for me, and it's probably one that you're familiar with, and maybe your audience is as well, but it's a pretty simple one, and it separates average salespeople, of which there are many, from exceptional salespeople, of which there are very few. And it's really focusing on controllable inputs and non-controllable inputs. Because I think like average salespeople can build a good pipe, they might have 8 or 9 deals, and then they kind of sit on it and they're like just talking about the same deals and the same pipeline the whole time, rather than being like, hey, I've done everything I can on that deal. I've hit the imagine it's a tennis court. I've hit the ball back into their court, and I'm just waiting on legal or whatever's going on with them, which I can't influence that anymore. I've done everything I can. So I should just go focus on my habits and my pipe, building my pipe for the next quarter. Very challenging thing to do. It's just not in our nature. You've kind of got to wire yourself to do it differently, because all you want to do is kind of talk about the things that you have coming. And I'm a glass half full guy. So I'm like, these deals are coming. It's quite funny. My team take the mick out of me for that. But the exceptional people, they'll just be like, right, no, done everything I can there. Now it's up to my guys to come back and say yes, no, maybe, whatever they want to say. So that's the piece of advice I would give people. Is that really, and that's something that they control. They have input. People talk a lot about like multi-threading and this sort of thing. And I think it's very difficult sometimes. It's like you're not going to get a hold of the CFO, man. Like these guys are like extremely busy and they don't want to talk to you, with all due respect. So I think some of the advice out there, it's not practically applicable for a lot of reps. Whereas I think this one is, because it's like it comes from within. It's like, how do you manage your time? How do you think about things? Don't obsess over the deal that is going to happen. Go and find 3 more. Who are their competitors, right? That's always the easy one for me. It's like, you've got this deal, you know it inside out, all of the stakeholders, the market, because, in order to really persuade the customer that you're the right vendor, you need to know them well. Well, go speak to companies who look a little bit like them, right? Rather than wasting time waiting for them to get back to you. So hopefully it's practical advice for people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that one. I think some of this stuff is stylistic as well to a degree. I mean, I'm certainly a sales leader that does get pretty bullish about multi-threading and finding a way into other stakeholders. And I think ultimately you've got to look at the deal. You've got to look at what it is that you're selling and you're offering. You've got to look at the temperament of the seller and your team, and then take some active decisions on, is there an opportunity to get higher and wider? If so, let's absolutely go for it. But equally, if that's not going to serve where we are in the cycle and where we are right now. Let's not just do things to do them because it's just the thing to do. So definitely one that we could unpack further. Now, before we wrap, Matt, I have one final question for you, which is really, what is the single best piece of advice that you'd have to any sales leader that's listening right now to help them to up level in their career?
Yeah, I think you got to pick your leadership style. That was something which I struggled with early on. I was like, have I got to be like this? Have I got to behave like this? Have I got to be, have I got to be authoritative? And you've got to work out what works for you and your personality. Because if you try to force a leadership style onto yourself, which doesn't suit your personality type, it's going to come across awkward. You're going to feel crap about yourself. So I did a load of research on it, and I spoke to some role models, and they passed this advice on to me. And the leadership style I landed on was servant leadership, because it's kind of the thing that suited my personality the best. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think do your research. Obviously, you know what you're like, and then pick a style that's gonna suit you.
Wonderful. What a way to wrap up. How did you find being on, Matt? Did you enjoy yourself?
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. It's always good to chat to fellow sales leaders about topics which we all struggle with day to day, and it's always motivating to hear that you're not the only one. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thanks for having me on.
It was great to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and insights with the masses. Thank you to everyone listening. Great to know that you stayed tuned through the entire episode. Please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, depending on where you're listening to this. And if you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, really appreciate you taking some time to leave us a 5-star review. On that note, we'll wrap up and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers, Alex.